Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. After a fascinating month in F1, big questions have been raised as to whether Red Bull have made the correct decision when it comes down to their driver lineup. Lando Norris believes yes, if you are one of their competitors, saying outright that he believes Ferrari or McLaren are the favourites for this year's Constructors' Championship, effectively writing off Red Bull's chance because they only have one driver delivering. Very harsh words of multiple drivers over the last few days on Sergio Perez's recent performance. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, just quickly on this, we mentioned it yesterday, the latest news that Newey's joining Ferrari. Now, this has been speculated and reported a number of times, but I will say this latest article here from Business F1 magazine, there's a couple of people that reached out to me and said, you know what, I'm pretty sure this is happening. So take it as you will, but the Newey Ferrari thing I think is gathering more steam over the last couple of days, and I wouldn't be massively surprised if we see some sort of announcement around this in the near future, which of course would be just a massive story in the Formula 1 world. Bit of drama coming out of Montreal as well. You guys may well remember that Sergio Perez, when he binned it in the wall and of course destroyed his rear wing, it was very clear this car was not restarting the race, just because you can't fix the rear wing. You can't just take it off and put a new one on like you can the front wing. So if the rear wing is damaged like this, there was 0% chance that Perez was completing this Grand Prix. It was just not going to happen. But Red Bull told him, look, Sergio, get back to the pits because we don't want to cause a safety car for Max. And as a result of that, Red Bull have been fined some money, and Perez has been given a 3-place grid penalty for the next race in, of course, Spain. Now, the question was that Helmut Marko said, if we have a look at this quote, Lewis once crossed the line on 3 wheels at Silverstone and won. Strange there was no penalty then. Now, I don't really see the equivalency here. This, of course, was the 2020 British Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton got a puncture on the final lap and closed out the race like this, securing victory by, I think it was, maybe was he 3-4 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen at the end of the race after nursing the car home through the final couple of corners with this car. But to me, it's not, you know, with Perez, he was basically strewing debris across the track here with this broken rear wing. That's not really the case here. And also, you know, Hamilton, what's he meant to do? Like pit and put a new set of tyres on? I mean, he can do that on the coming laps. I mean, it's possible because that's what happens when you get a puncture. You're not necessarily putting debris everywhere. And obviously, the race could be continued like this, whereas for Perez, there was no chance it would be. So I don't really see the equivalency, but I did see some discussion on it over the last few days, so I thought at least I'd mention it. And speaking of Helmut Marko, he doesn't seem to have the power at Red Bull anymore. The feeling is that Horner has now taken full control over what's going on within an operation, and as Joe Soward says in his latest Green Notebook, Lawson is a likely possibility. But who knows? Because if Horner is actually calling the shots there fully now, you know, he's a Ricciardo guy and he's a Perez guy, it seems. Well, maybe he's a more business guy than he is a constructor's title guy, which is kind of why we're going to have the discussion in the coming minutes as to what's going on with Sergio Perez right now. This is what Soward has to say in his notebook, though. Now that Perez has re-signed with Red Bull and Yuki Tsunoda has re-signed with the Visa, etc. team, which closes the door that he might have at Audi, the question will now be, who do you put alongside Yuki? Is it going to be Ricciardo? Is it going to be Lawson? There are rumours, well at least he says, at the moment it looks like Lawson could get the drive after the summer break, but if Ricciardo suddenly starts doing world champion-like performances, which of course is pretty unlikely, let's be honest, Red Bull will have a problem. Well, Red Bull will have a problem in the sense that they've signed Perez. Maybe Perez will have the problem if Ricciardo starts performing better, but then again, it's not like they're just going to, you know, drop Perez after they've just re-signed a deal a month ago. I don't really know. If Red Bull doesn't give the seat to Lawson, though, of course, he can go, and that kind of defeats the purpose, as he says, of spending loads of money on junior teams. So there are some questions here, and the fact that Ricciardo hasn't been re-signed yet does make me wonder whether, you know what, they might give the drive to Lawson. And obviously he's talking about rumours that could it be possible that Ricciardo drives until the summer break, Lawson drives after that, and then they weigh up their respective performances compared to Yuki, and then they decide who gets the seat for next season. That's possible. But I think Horner would probably want to keep Ricciardo because, you know, he's good for business at the end of the day, even though Lawson maybe deserves the seat, depending on your guys' opinion in the comments section below. Few upgrade talks as well. Williams have apparently, after the British Grand Prix, a very substantial upgrade in the works. They've not done massive things to their car recently, but it is a more consistent car this year that Williams have. It's not just a straight line speed rocket ship merchant, basically, when it's terrible and it has no downforce, but it will at least go fast in a straight line. It is more of an all-rounder. It's a relatively weak all-rounder, but it is an all-rounder nonetheless, and there's apparently a big upgrade package there on the way. RB, though, in the hands of Yuki and Ricciardo, Lawson, whatever, they have lots going on, and apparently they've got a new floor coming in Spain that's going to be worth 0.2 of a second. They're already, sometimes, faster than Aston Martin. In fact, that's been the case mostly over the last few rounds, so will be interesting to see how fast they can be, and why for Yuki, although the Red Bull seat at the proper team, it seems out of the realms of possibility because, for whatever reason, Horner and Red Bull don't want to put him in that car, at least their car that he actually drives is getting just better and better over time. Red Bull, by the way, have promising upgrades on the way, although I will say they did have promising upgrades for Imola, right? Helmut Marko said, yep, we expect a lot from these upgrades. Imola arrives, they win, but not by much. And then obviously they lose Monaco, and it wasn't exactly great in Montreal either. So it's not like those very good, basically big step upgrades in Imola did much. Even James Allison went as far to say that effectively they were downgrades to the Red Bull car. But Red Bull now say, no, we've got promising upgrades on the way. Verstappen has even said that he believes they can fix their issues over the curbs without destroying their other benefits that the car has. So I guess we'll see if that's true from, I think Silverstone will be a big Grand Prix where loads of upgrades are going to be brought to these cars. Quickly on Mercedes, because the 2026 regulations have caused lots of controversy over the last couple of weeks after their announcement, and then all the teams not being so happy about it. Now, June the 30th, that is the date where the regulations have to be finalised by, and then some small tweaks can be made over the coming months, going into January 1st, 2025, which is the date where the teams can start working on those regulations, at least the aero regulations, for the 2026 season getting underway. June the 30th is the deadline. Even the FIA are saying that, yeah, there are concerns with the active aero, how it's going to work in corners. There are some things that we've got to kind of iron out. But all of the teams, bar one team, voted to have the deadline extended from June the 30th down to October the 30th, which would push the deadline back by quite some way, effectively to ensure that they can do a better job with these regulations. Mercedes were the only team to say, no, we're going to veto that, and you need all 10 teams to agree. So Mercedes were the ones that said, no, we're not happy with that idea. We want to keep it at June the 30th. And Mercedes say, well, if you push it, and this might be a fair point, if you push it back to October the 30th, is there any guarantee the regulations will be better than they are now? And if that's true, then you've only got 2 months to rectify the problems until December before the start of the regulations start getting built in January. But if you put the deadline now, you've got 6 months to work on that. And that might be an argument that Mercedes want to make. But the other teams would say, no, let's actually have 4 months of proper progress here. But Mercedes disagree, and wonder why Mercedes might disagree. My theory is they're pretty happy with these regulations. They're looking at the fact that the floor is going to be significantly weaker than it was before, which of course has been part of the car they've struggled with. They're seeing the power unit side of the equation probably being a massive part. That's been a big talking point, that given the way the aero regs are designed, the strength of the engine is probably going to be very important, and Mercedes believe they probably have the strongest engine. And even Toto Wolff says, yep, well, the ship has sailed if you want to make any changes to the power unit regulations, because Horner and Verstappen and Red Bull have been saying over the past few months, yeah, we're not so happy about this 50-50 thing, we want to do this, we want to do that. And Wolff's like, yep, nothing you've got to do about it now, guys, the ship has sailed, good luck type thing. So there's definitely a feeling at Mercedes that in 2026 they're going to be in a really good position. I don't think they would veto that extension if they didn't feel the regulations potentially rather significantly favoured them. But let's talk about the driver situation, because George Russell the other day said that he believes Mercedes can continue to fight at the front. Well, actually, I think he said fight with the others and Max. He didn't say fight with the McLarens, the Ferraris and the Red Bulls week on week. He said fight with the Ferraris, the McLarens and Max, which kind of shows you what Russell and, well, some of these other drivers think of Sergio Perez. Even Helmut Marko said after the weekend that Max would have also won the race in the McLaren or the Mercedes. Now, you can debate that, but the reality is the driver on some level makes a difference. The car is, of course, the most important thing in Formula 1. Is the Red Bull the best car right now? I don't know. There's been circuits recently where it hasn't been. Max has still done his best with that car, and obviously capitalised on mistakes effectively in Canada to get the Grand Prix victory. Sergio Perez, on the other hand, out in Q1, didn't score any points in the Grand Prix, crashed out towards the end of the race. One car, one driver, same car, another driver, a rather different story over the last few months. And Perez says, look, I'm going to get back to form, or as he likes to say, we are going to get back to form. he talks about the fact that, yeah, there's 3 to 4 teams fighting for wins this season. He says, I think it's great to have this level of competition. It's great for the fans, right? We go into a weekend right now. I think, like, Red Bull is still, I think, the strongest package overall. But we go into a weekend feeling, I don't really know who's going to win. Monaco, I was like, you know what? I don't think Max is probably going to win this weekend. It feels to me like, given the characteristics of that car, somebody else is going to win. That, of course, is what happens. Now, Montreal happens and Mercedes are up there. Like, it is exciting from a fan base perspective. But if you're Perez, is it good? I don't think it is. Because last season, at this time in the year, he was P2 in the championship and he remains P2 until the end of the season because the RB19 was so good compared to the rest of the field. This year, Perez can be 3 to 4 tenths off Max. 3 to 4 tenths off Max is probably putting you P8, P9, P10 on some of these circuits. I mean, Hamilton was 2.5-ish tenths off the pole time in Canada, and he was P7, right? Which is, mega the way how tight it is bunched right now at the top of the field, certainly in qualifying. And, Perez just doesn't have the pace to put it in a good position in quali. And then obviously when the race comes around, that puts him in a tricky spot. He obviously also talks about the fact that Red Bull are finding it harder to unlock performance, which is inevitable. But other teams, Mercedes have found performance, Ferrari have found performance, McLaren have found performance. I think Red Bull will, but maybe Max will find some performance and somebody else won't. This, by the way, are the number of points scored over the last 3 races. And so Mercedes 60 points, Red Bull are actually third at 62, Ferrari at 65, and McLaren the top scorers in the last 3 rounds with 88 points. Now, I will say that this is why they re-signed Sergio Perez, because without him, they would be last place here, Red Bull, because with only Max, they've scored 58 points. So they would be, with just Max alone, they'd be 2 points behind Mercedes because Perez has scored a grand total of 4 points over the last 3 rounds. In the last 3 races, Max has scored 58 points, Tsunoda has scored 5, Perez and Ricciardo have both scored 4 points respectively. So it's not great, is it? It's not great. And that has raised the question, what about this year's Constructors' Championship? They gave Perez a 2-year deal. There's still been some debate on this because Helmut Marko, and I'm pretty sure Red Bull said initially, this is a 2-year contract, as in straight up 2 years, no 1+1. Now, of course, contracts can always be broken, right? Like if Perez really falls off an absolute cliff, they're not going to keep him around for the 2nd year. But it does add a bit of chaos. Like Perez will drive there next season, and the feeling is that he'll drive there the year after in 2026 based on his contract that is being reported. And as I've said multiple times, the teams don't really want to change driver lineups between years in 25 to 26 just because there's so much else changing that the teams would prefer some degree of consistency from 25 to 26 just because there's so much else to think about. But that may not be the case. They could buy him out. And I think even kind of Horner let slip this weekend that it's another year, I think is what he said about Perez. They've given him 1 more year. And then they were like, isn't it a 2-year deal? And he said, well, 1+1 is 2 type thing. So the point is that maybe Perez only has a 1-year extension and then it's a +1 kind of option, which presumably would be an option on the team side rather than Perez's side. But we've said for the last couple of years, I've thought they're going to get rid of Perez for some time. They haven't. And I'm surprised, right? Because Red Bull are usually so cutthroat with their decisions, but that seemingly is not the case, right? And I think the re-signing of Perez was in many ways indicative that Red Bull just don't really care about the Constructors' Championship. Like, they think Max can win the drivers, which he will. They potentially think that Max can win the Constructors on his own, which maybe he still can because he could have done last year, which is not a surprise given his dominance over the course of the season. And Perez is like, well, he'll sell us some caps and some merch and stuff to the audience in that region. So I guess that's the thinking, but it does open the door big time because there are 2 championships up for grabs every season. And obviously the fans really care about the drivers, right? That's what people really care about. That's what the drivers really care about. And on some level, the teams like that as well. But the teams, the Constructors' Championship is big. That's where the prize money is given out. At the end of the day, there's like 1,000 people working for all of these teams back at the factory. There's one driver that wins the Drivers' Championship, but there's, 1,000 people who effectively win the Constructors' Championship. So it is a big deal to the manufacturers, and it is a championship up for grabs. Like, if you're a driver, let's say you're a Norris, you've never won the World Championship as a driver, but, if you become a Constructors' title winner, at least it's something. It's not what you want, but, it's something at the very least. You've won a championship in your career in Formula 1. So, as Norris says, on the Constructors' constructors battle. At the minute, it's between Ferrari and us. Now, when I saw this quote, I thought he probably said, you know, it's between Ferrari and us to challenge Red Bull for the Constructors' Championship. But no, he actually straight up said he doesn't even think Red Bull are in the fight, effectively. I mean, they're in the fight. But you see what I'm saying here when you read the quote. To be honest, so he was asked the thoughts on the Constructors post-race in Canada. To be honest, at the minute, I think it's between Ferrari and us. Yeah, so we'll keep pushing. I think that's one of our biggest strengths at the minute. We have two drivers, as McLaren, who are up there, not making mistakes and getting pretty much everything out of the car every single weekend. Yes, it's rare. There are not many other teams on the grid that have such a thing. For us, it's more of what we can do against Ferrari. Again, we have been a more consistent team coming into the weekends. They, as in Ferrari, have had some mistakes and just struggled a bit more for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, I think 2 is going to be better than 1, you know, in Max's case. So making it very clear that as far as he is concerned, Red Bull is a one-driver team and will remain that way. And to be fair, as McLaren, as Ferrari, as Mercedes have become more competitive over the last few rounds, it shouldn't really be a surprise that Perez is now shuffled down the order. And of course, when you're starting Monaco in P18, you know, you're opening the door to get taken out lap 1 by Magnussen. And even if he didn't get taken out lap 1, you know, is he making that much progress in the field there? Probably not. Did he in Canada after qualifying poorly? No. So, you know, it's not like Norris is wrong, but I just think the statement to say, yeah, it's just between Ferrari and us for the constructors, because Max is fighting for the maximum 25 points. Perez is probably not going to deliver all that much from now to the end of the season, whereas McLaren are saying, yeah, we can be second, third, we can be third, fourth, we can be whatever it takes to deliver good points, as can Ferrari. So that's Norris's feeling. Damning indictment really on Sergio Perez, but I think understandably so. These are the current driver standings. Last year, Max was on 229. This year, he's on 194, so not actually that dissimilar in the grand scheme of things. This time last year, of course, Perez had a couple of race wins to his name, and he was second on 148. Alonso was third on 131, the same as Norris has this year. Then it was Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc, Russell, Stroll, Ocon, Norris in the top 10. This year, from top to bottom, it goes Yuki, then Alonso, of course, Stroll's not here, then Hamilton, Russell, and then you get, you know, the cars that have been performing better. Piastri, but Perez 107. Of course, Perez behind a Carlos Sainz that missed a race, of course, back in Jeddah. And yes, both Sainz and Perez and Leclerc DNF'd and didn't score any points back in Canada, but nonetheless, Norris is now at 131. Verstappen, of course, at 194. So that championship is done, I would say, on the drivers. It's like the largest ever points differential that's been overturned in championship history is 42 points, which is what Verstappen overturned on Leclerc in 2022. This points gap is substantially greater than that now, so it just seems very unlikely that Max doesn't win the drivers. But the constructors, it is all to play for, right? McLaren are, to be fair, 90 points behind Red Bull. Ferrari are 50 points or 49 points behind. So, you know, I don't really see how Red Bull aren't in the fight here, because Max can win every race and Perez can be P8 every race. And Red Bull are still going to be performing at a very good level and still scoring loads of points. Or maybe Lando just thinks that Perez is that bad and performing that badly that he's going to basically score no points from now to the end of the season. This guy's going to be completely cooked every weekend, and therefore it really is a one-man battle. And of course it's also bad for Max, because let's say Max is P1 in, let's say, after qualifying, and you've got 2 McLarens right behind him, or 2 Mercedes right behind him, or 2 Ferraris right behind him. It opens the door to strategy. Someone can go for the undercut, someone can go for the overcut. You know, when a safety car happens, it gives the advantage to that team if there's no wingman in play. So the gap is still pretty big there, is what I'm trying to say. Like, Norris is not only saying that the championship is between Ferrari and McLaren in the constructors, but he's saying that that is true despite the fact that both of those teams are like 50 points down on Red Bull. Now, that is certainly an overturnable gap, obviously. But I think it certainly says something on the way that he and maybe the rest of the grid perceive Perez's recent performance. But very much intriguing your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.